Minister, my question relates to the announcement that Donald Trump formal recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and the consequences for the region.
Yeah, no, look, in relation to the US announcements, the government's position and the government's position, I refer deputies to my reply a few minutes ago to priority question number 28, as well as to the statement which I issued on behalf of the government on the 6th of December, which I will not repeat my earlier reply, but I'd like to add the following. The decision by the United States and its implications was discussed by the EU foreign ministers, both at the Foreign Affairs Council on Monday and in the informal meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, which preceded it. And of course, last week, many EU partners like Ireland had made statements of their own position following the US announcement. High Representative Mogherini had likewise issued a statement on behalf of the EU. The EU and its member states have reaffirmed our belief in a two-state solution to the conflict, including the future of Jerusalem as a capital for both states, both Israel and Palestine. That remains our clear position. In the informal meeting on Monday, I myself stressed to Prime Minister Netanyahu the continuing necessity both for a solution based on two states, including a sovereign state of Palestine, and a complete freeze on further settlement expansion, which is something, by the way, that I also made very clear to him when I visited Israel 4 or 5 months ago. There has understandably been a strong reaction in the region to the US decision, but I want to acknowledge that most Palestinians have expressed their anger and frustration peacefully. Regrettably, a small number have resorted to violence, including the firing of rockets from Gaza, which of course I condemn. At least 2 people have already lost their lives, and I hope that all concerned will show restraint, both in protesting and in responding to peaceful protests, so that no further lives are lost. Jerusalem has been a focus of tension and a flashpoint for violence in recent years. The international community has repeatedly called for parties to refrain from unilateral action which might increase those tensions. Unfortunately, that's what we saw last week.
Thanks, Minister. I don't know who writes your statements, but surely you don't believe that. I mean,
sorry?
Surely you do not believe that the two-state solution is non-existent. I mean, what happened last week was deeply incendiary by Donald Trump and calculated to cause a reaction in the Middle East. And Jerusalem will never be the capital of Israel, and never should be recognised or formally recognised by the EU. This minister will only embolden not only Donald Trump's reactionary supporters in the United States, but the reactionary elements of Zionist Israel, of Netanyahu. And this is kind of legitimises what Netanyahu wants to do. He has no interest in a two-state solution. That's pie in the sky, Minister. And I think the time for the EU to actually recognise that there is absolutely no way this can be a two-state solution. The only solution is a one-state where Palestinians, Jews and Christians all live together as much as possible peacefully.
I mean, that may be your view, and it's the view that some others hold as well. But the international consensus is very, very clear on this issue. That the most viable way for Israelis and Palestinians to live side by side is in the context of a two-state solution. That's what the Irish government supports. That's what the EU supports as a whole. That has been the subject of many debates and conclusions and resolutions in the UN. And that is what we would like to see. But certainly the announcement last week, in my view, makes it more difficult to re-establish a political process that can lead to that outcome. But the Irish government and I, on behalf of the Irish government, will do everything I can to encourage a process that can result in that outcome.
No, sorry, I'll just deal with it this way. A final supplementary from Deputy Kennedy, and then...
Mr. I mean, what fundamentally goes at the heart of this conflict is, I don't really see, or there is a conflict, but it's a David and Goliath conflict. But Israel fundamentally is not this liberal state that the EU kind of patronizes. It's a racist, apartheid state, as much as it was South Africa was back in the 1980s and the 70s and 60s. So the time for treating Israel as a normal state is over. Israel is a cancer in the Middle East. It's there to confront Palestinians, and it's there to humiliate Palestinians. And what Donald Trump done last week, Minister, will start another intifada. It's already begun in Palestine. That's what that has done. It's an incendiary to actually say Palestinian matters do not matter. Even Netanyahu says that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people. What the hell is that? I mean, that's like something that what we've seen back in apartheid South Africa. So Israel is an apartheid state, and the EU and the Irish government, as long as they treat Israel as some liberal democracy, we will always have Israel as an apartheid state.
Minister.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't believe that language is helpful to what we're trying to do. Israel is a state that has a right to exist and has a right to defend itself, and has a right to look after legitimate security concerns in a part of the world that is very unstable. But in my view,
Minister,
Palestinians...
do you believe South Africa...
Let me answer the question, Deputy. In my view, Palestinians also have a right to a state, and much of their land is occupied at the moment. And what we need to do is to try and move a process forward that treats both sides with equal respect, and allows for a situation where the legitimate concerns of Palestinian people is addressed, and that the misery that many Palestinians live in today, particularly the humanitarian challenges that they face in Gaza, but also in parts of the West Bank, are addressed. And that is why the international community and the European Union within that, showing leadership, needs to facilitate a process whereby we can have a negotiated solution again. That has not been the case for more than 2 decades now, despite the fact that the Oslo process and the Oslo Accords provide a clear roadmap within which to do that. And so I think taking hardline positions on one side or the other is not helpful. But I think we do need to recognise when mistakes are made, and I believe a mistake was made last week by the US President making the announcement that he did. And I think we all have a responsibility to try and calm things after that mistake.
There will be 4 more supplementaries. I want to flag for Deputy Durkan. His question has been grouped, so I'll be calling you for supplementaries. Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Minister, will you please get real? Donald Trump's decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel was not a mistake. It was a calculated declaration of war against the Palestinian people, against the Arab world and the Muslim population. And if you don't see that, you are living in cloud cuckoo land. Netanyahu is celebrating. He's now claiming that the European Union eventually will accept this and move its own embassies to Jerusalem. And are you seriously suggesting that the Israeli government, given what it has done since the Oslo Accords, in accelerating illegal settlements, in carving up Jerusalem, ethnically cleansing thousands of Palestinians from East Jerusalem, carving up Hebron, literally slicing Hebron in two, to the point that there are now 600,000 settlers in the West Bank, double what there was in Oslo? Do you honestly believe Israel has the slightest interest in peace? And now the United States has made absolutely clear it has no interest in peace either. I've never believed in the two-state solution because it legitimises ethnic cleansing. But whether you believe in it or don't believe in it, it is now dead. Because Israel has systematically flouted Oslo, flouted UN international law, and at what point do you say sanctions become justified faced with that?
Tanis Chet, 1 minute.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't accept that the two-state solution is now dead, and I think that would be a hugely negative message to send to Palestinians and to Israelis, for that matter, many of whom I've spoken to who do want a lasting, peaceful solution. And who are committed to a two-state solution. I have to say that the actions of the Israeli government, particularly in the context of settlements, and the expansion of settlements and the increasing settler population in the West Bank, is certainly difficult to see as compatible with a willingness to negotiate a viable two-state solution for Palestinians also. And I've made that very clear. And the European Union has made that very clear. And the High Representative Mogherini made it very clear this week that EU countries would not be recognising the state or Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving their embassies following the lead of the US. That was made very clear this week by the High Representative. So let's talk about the facts and let's look to try and calm issues rather than inflame them.
Deputy, final supplementary.
Do you think there should be any sanction for breaking international law? The systematic breaking of international law. Do you believe that at any point you think sanctions are justified against Syria? Do you think at any point sanctions should be imposed on Israel for what it's doing? Or do you think anything other than words of concern should be expressed about the fact that the United States has now legitimised the breaking of international law? Do you think it was legitimate to dismantle the apartheid state in Israel using sanctions and boycott? What's the difference? Explain to me what the difference is. What is the difference between the systematic flouting of international law and the ethnic cleansing being conducted by the Israeli state and what apartheid South Africa did? Can you explain the difference? Because I can't see the difference, except for the fact that Israel has done it more thoroughly. Do you oppose ethnic cleansing? Because that is what is being done in East Jerusalem. There's no other word for it.
Minister to respond.
No, what I believe is actually trying to get a political result that works for everybody. Rather than grandstanding.
Deputy. Taoiseach without interruption.
Yeah. Okay. What I believe we are trying to do within the European Union is to get unity and consensus, which we have on settlements, which we have on a two-state solution, which we have on continuing to put pressure on Israel to ensure that they come to the negotiating table, and we will continue to do that in an effort to try to get an outcome that is fair to both Israelis and Palestinians. And that is what we are working towards. I don't believe that Ireland should put itself firmly into one far side or the other. Instead, what we are trying to do, and what I have been trying to do with other EU states, is to work with them to build strong consensus within the European Union where I believe we will be listened to, and where I also believe we will be much more effective in terms of getting a response from Israel if we can get an EU consensus on a way forward.